Thank you. Peter Manuel is a cattle farmer who years ago took the initiative of forming Flag Australia. Welcome, Peter. Could you tell us what is Flag Australia?
Good to speak to you again, Professor. Well, FLAG stands for Food Producers Landowners Action Group, and we are concerned about what's the mum and dad farmers in this red and the green over-regulation and all this climate change scam that's making it very, very difficult for us to grow clean, healthy food for all. And we keep fighting for the mum and dad farmers' rights to grow clean, healthy food.
You've told me that Sarah Gome in the South Australian Parliament is introducing a water bill. Briefly, what is that all about?
Well, the water bill is pretty simple, and good on Sarah Game from One Nation here in South Australia for doing this. I've had many discussions with many politicians over the years, but she's taken the initiative, and it's pretty simple, really. It's when you're elected to Parliament, allegedly you don't have to declare your water entitlements. Well, what gives them the difference between, the average Australian that owns water, just because you're elected to Parliament, what you don't have to declare your water entitlements? Some water entitlements are worth millions of dollars. And
So
she owns court. Sorry, David, go on.
So they have to declare their real estate investments, their other investments, but they don't have to declare their water entitlements. That seems extraordinary.
No,
Well, it seems like
it's
appropriate
absolutely-
legislation.
It's very good legislation, and also she wants water restored to land, which, as we know, I think allegedly it was Malcolm Turnbull that separated water from land, if I'm correct, back in 2010, which should have never happened. We've got people owning water rights that don't own any land. This opens a Pandora box for situations where a farmer that's desperate sells a lot of his water entitlements, and pure speculators buy this water, and then there becomes a drought. Nothing, just a natural cycle. That's what we have here in Australia, sorry. And these speculators sit on their water rights and sell them back at exorbitant costs, which the mum and dad farmer can't. Water needs to be restored to land, and the only that should have water rights are people that own land.
Yes, I think you're right. That was a terrible mistake, and has meant that the speculators control the water, which is a disaster for Australia. We do silly things. I gather that they're thinking of charging you for your stock drinking from your water and on your dams. Is that something that they have in mind?
David, yes, I've heard that allegedly they want to charge us for stock and domestic use. Now, people have got to realise that don't know about this, that at the moment, our stock drink freely from the dam, so do the native animals and so forth, and quite happy about that. But if they're going to charge us for stock and domestic use, that means that everything will be on off system, everything will be metered, all the dams and creeks will be fenced off. So we've got native animals drinking out of our troughs, which we have to pay for, where at the moment we don't, and that's the way it should be. I mean, at the end of the day, we're growing a critical need called food. Australia's got 4% of agricultural land where we grow that food, and we've got situations now where with carbon credits, people or farmers are getting stock and planting their properties out in scrub, which is just going to cause a massive bushfire. So what happens with their carbon credits then when it all goes up in smoke? So our food bowl, especially cattle and sheep, are under real threat. And that's our protein gone, which our body and brain function needs protein big time. So this is just ridiculous if they go ahead with charging for stock and domestic use, because there's a little bit more to just charging us. A trough needed system, and we've got to pay for our dams and our bores and everything like that, and it runs into thousands and thousands of dollars for clean, healthy food for Australians.
Well, we know you're in the country at the moment on your station because the reception is a little blurry, but you tell me also that, and we know, that governments seem to be concerned about the methane emissions of your stock. and they're trying to get this down. And the federal government is doing all this sort of thing through secret negotiations. They don't make their proposals public until they're suddenly landed in Parliament, and people have to sign non-disclosure agreements before they're allowed to even see them and not take copies of them, and all sorts of things are happening in the federal Parliament. But what is this obsession with the methane emissions of your stock? But they seem to be limited to that.
Well, the ridiculous part, I think we're just dealing with pure here. They just control the aspect of it, whether it's so-called climate change, now the methane emissions. But I would like to say to any of these politician bureaucrats, World Economic Forum, United Nations, or whoever it is, why just farm animals if methane's such a problem? What about the 100 million feral camels in Australia? What about the 48 million kangaroos in Australia? What about the 200,000 water buffalo in Australia? What about termites? What about landfill? What about broken down vegetation? You never hear anything about that causing methane emissions. It's always picked on our farm animals, because what they're trying to do is reduce our food bowl big time. And this is a communist agenda, and it's absolutely disgraceful. And the people of Australia who want to follow this rot are going to be in real trouble, I can assure you. So this methane emissions is a whole heap of garbage, just like their climate change rubbish. It's about control, David.
The other thing I gather is that in a country of bushfires, we always have that problem of bushfires and always will, but your attempt to control fire hazards on your property is apparently limited, but it seems to be only limited to your property. Is that right?
Yeah, correct, David. We get letters from the council saying that we've got to slash or poison 5 metres from our boundary fence to the roadside vegetation, because that's habitat. But it's okay to destroy our food for our stock, which in turn feed the people. But if you drive around my area, around Strathalbyn, and go down the dirt roads and look at the broken debris, huge trunks of trees, branches, whatever, that are going to burn for weeks, that's okay. But the latest email out to farmers that they've got to slash their grass 5 metres from the fence. Now, do you know what? If I wanted to plant prickly acacia bush along my boundary fence, which is highly flammable, acacia paradoxy, a kerosene bush it's called, that'd be fine. So that causes a bigger, hotter fire than our grass or pasture for our animals. That would be fine. But because it's feed for our animals, that has to go. This is an agenda that is destroying the mum and dad farmer. It is disgusting, David. And, you know, we need some government to have some real guts and get away from this net zero rubbish, get away from this climate change garbage, and let's get back to common sense. Because these carbon credits that some farmers are going into now, what's going to happen when there's another major fire, which we'll get one? What's going to happen to their carbon credits then? It goes up in smoke. It's ridiculous.
And are transmission lines across your properties a big problem in South Australia?
Not so much in South Australia at the moment, but it will be. And that's another good point. I'm glad you brought that up, because with these wind turbines and these solar panels, I mean, I've seen something on Facebook where there's huge acres of solar panels. Storm, it's wrecked those. What about our wind turbines? What's going to happen after, say, 15 or 20 years of them going to go into landfill? Look at the amount of concrete and stuff that comes out of the ground that's called mining to make these things, solar panels and wind turbines. And the greens, it's called green energy. There's nothing green about them at all. You know what? Us farmers are more conservationists than these greenies, I can assure you. And if we don't get change in this country, David, I hate to think what's going to happen.
Nick Cater, who does a program on this outlet, went to North Queensland, where he found on a farmer's property just dumped enormous wind turbines, so large, and they didn't know what to do with them. They would be finished because they don't last that long, and they were finished, and there was nowhere to put them, and they're just lying there on the property, and we're going to have them all over the country. Now, before you go, Peter, you told me once you had a Brumby, and in New South Wales, the New South Wales government has launched on a program. They've, I think, inflated the number of Brumbies in the snowy area, and they're culling them, not culling them in any kind way. They're culling them in a very cruel way, that is, from helicopters. And the poor horses are being shot, and of course they're not being destroyed. They go into a terrible situation there. And there's a big demand in New South Wales, apparently, which can't be fulfilled, of homing them, of breaking them in, because they make marvellous horses. And I think that was your experience, was it not, Peter?
Yeah, yeah, no, exactly. As a child, I had horses. I remember I was in hospital actually, 8 years of age, having my appendix out, and my parents come in and saw me, and I said to Dad, gee, I wouldn't mind a Brumby, and he bought me one. And anyway, a guy up the road from our little farm that we had back in those days, because Dad was a butcher, had his own butcher shop in town, and broke it in, and it was an absolutely magnificent horse. And people have got to realise with these Brumbies have mated with thoroughbred horses, because, we've had thoroughbreds on stations and everything like that. With all this breeding, crossbreeding and so on, the horses are pretty intelligent, I can assure you. And to just go out and shoot these animals are disgusting. And we're shooting, the whale of horses in the Northern Territory out of helicopters as well. These whale of horses were absolutely magnificent in the First and Second World Wars. They could walk long distances because they didn't need as much water. And we're destroying, it's almost like we're destroying our history in every way possible. These horses, Brumbies, whale of horses, Captain Cook's statue, and the list goes on. So I think it's about time we have a degree back to real democracy and real conservative politics.
Well, that's supposed to be the reason why they're being got rid of, being exterminated in New South Wales, because the minister believes that there's a link with colonialism and you have to get rid of that. And the federal government, Tanya Plibersek, has announced a program which is to really liquidate all Brumbies in Australia, to get rid of them all in Australia, which seems to me to be excessive and unnecessary, particularly as we know, apparently in New South Wales, that there is this demand. They call it homing the horses. There's enormous demand. They can't fulfill it, of getting Brumbies and using them as domesticated horses. Peter, thank you very much. And congratulations for all you're doing, and keep up the good job with Flag Australia. It's a wonderful organisation, a wonderful name, and I know you're doing wonderful work there in South Australia. Thank you.
Much appreciated, David. Good to talk.